Well, hello everybody, and welcome back to 115 Gaming, your home for all the tips and tools you need to excel at your games of Six Siege, the board game. And what I'm going to do today is actually remake the first video we ever made on this channel, and that is the basics of Six Siege. This is a strategy guide, it is a tips guide, it is not a how to play video. So once again, we assume that you already know the rules and how to play the game, and you're just coming here for general strategies and such, and tips on how to start getting better at your games of Six Siege. So with that, we have split this guide into 4 parts. 1. Overwatching. 2. Gadgets. 3. Movement and positioning. And 4. General tips. Let's get started with part 1, Overwatching. Obviously every action can be important, but we think that Overwatching is probably one of the most important actions in the game. It's very flexible, it's very adaptable, it's what's going to allow you to do your actions and continue to watch your back and shoot at enemy operators outside of your turn, which is obviously incredibly important. And as such, I think there are a couple of tips that you need to keep in mind when you're thinking about Overwatching. When in doubt, Overwatch. Now, this is actually going to be part of a more broader tip across all 4 categories that we're going to talk about today. But basically, this is more, don't think of this as always be overwatching, but think of this more as if you have an action that you haven't spent yet and you're not sure what to do, think about overwatching. When you activate an operator in Six Siege, you get 3 total actions, 1 movement action and 2 regular actions. And it is advised that you should take all 3 of these actions to their fullest every time you activate an operator. When you don't spend one of those actions, you are wasting so much action economy, and in a game like this, every action counts. So when we say when in doubt Overwatch, what we're more talking about is if you have an unspent action, try looking at the board and determining if maybe doing an Overwatch action would help get you some mileage across the board, across your action economy, if it were. If you have just an unspent action and you're thinking about ending your turn, you should definitely consider overwatching. Even if you feel like you're not overwatching something important, you never know if that angle that you need to watch will become important later on in the game. And plus, an action spent is better than an action unspent. So when in doubt, or when you have an extra action, consider overwatching instead of just dropping your operator's turn with a whole action left available to you. Secondly, when you decide to overwatch, make sure you're overwatching as much space as possible. When you first start out playing the game, you don't quite realize how good it is that when you overwatch, you're actually overwatching everything in a complete 180-degree arc in front of you. And so what that means is if you position your operators in certain spaces, you can actually overwatch way more space than you originally thought. So make sure you're not overwatching in like these tunnel vision scenarios where maybe you're just looking down a hallway, whereas maybe if you just backed it up, or if you peeked out at a different angle, you could actually overwatch so much more space available to you. You want to make sure that you make it as hard as possible for either side to get around your overwatching operator. Overwatch from cover. Okay, this is a big one. So often what will happen, at least for me, and this is why I'm imparting this tip onto you, is that you'll think that an overwatch is enough to save your operator. Surely, if you're overwatching and an operator peeks out from behind a wall, you'll be able to repost, so you'll kill that operator before they can shoot you. You would be surprised how often an overwatch is not enough. You should always be overwatching from cover if you can. If another operator is peeking out from behind cover and you get a repost, they're going to get to block 2 to 3 hits from that die roll, which means they can probably survive. And if you're not in cover, then they're going to get to have their whole entire roll against you, which means you're probably going to die. And you'll realize, wait a minute, that overwatch that I didn't actually do a whole lot to defend myself. What you need to be doing is whenever you're overwatching, also consider, can I overwatch as much space as possible? But secondly, is there a place I can overwatch this amount of space from cover if I get shot at? The goal here is that you don't even want your opponent to even peek out and try to shoot against you, because if you're behind cover, you'll get 2 shots against them and they'll only get 1 shot against you. And if you're in cover, you'll probably get to kill them. And so they'll have to spend more time to get around to you. All right, moving on from Overwatch. Secondly, we would like to talk about gadgets and how to use those properly. We just have a couple of tips for gadgets, but they're 2 very important ones. Number 1, when in doubt, use a gadget action. Okay, so we mentioned how obviously this point is kind of like a broader point amongst all categories, right? We mentioned this with Overwatch too. But basically, use all your actions. If you're considering ending your operator's turn without using all of their actions available to them, check your tactical inventory gadget or check your operator gadgets to see if there's another action that you can use before you end your turn. Gadgets are what make or break a game for you, and gadgets are part of your action economy. And in this game, the actions are very important, and being able to clear out the enemy operators or clear out enemy gadgets or clear out walls, anything like that. That all happens with gadgets, and it's all very important. And so if you're looking at the board and you're thinking, I already did this one thing with my operator, so I'm just going to drop his action. Well, wait before you do that. And before you end your turn, look at two things. Look at your operator gadgets, and then look at your tactical inventory and see, is there something I can go ahead and do, even though I wasn't planning on it? Is there something I can use a gadget for to do something now so that my other operators don't have to do it on their turn? And secondly, with gadgets, use those gadgets as fast as possible. So if you're like me when I play the video game, or when I first started playing the board game, my tendency was, well, I have all these cool gadgets, I have all these cool operator gadgets, and I want to save them for the last, 2 rounds of the game, like rounds 4 and 5. I'm going to use all my gadgets all at once, as the attacker to hold the side, or I'm going to use all my gadgets as the defender to get in. And when I can finally use those gadgets, it's going to be really good. Now, what's the problem with that? The problem is that 90% of the time you're going to end your game and you're going to have all your gadgets still left available to you, and you didn't use a single one of them because your operators all got killed by your enemy who was using all of their gadgets, and they beat you. You need to go into this game, and from the first round, you want to make sure that you are using all your gadgets as fast as possible, especially if they're operator gadgets. If they're operator gadgets, then you are relying on that operator staying alive to be able to actually use those gadgets. And if you save your operator gadgets and then that operator gets killed, that's 2 actions and 2 abilities that you have just completely lost. But secondly, with your tactical inventory gadgets, the tendency when you're starting is to kind of overlook them. They're just kind of bonus gadgets, and I don't really need to use them that much. That's not true. You don't want to just leave all these abilities on the table by the time your game ends. You'd be surprised how much your tactical inventory and your operator gadgets and abilities really open up the map for you. And if you just keep holding on to them, you're always going to feel more restricted than you actually are. Movement and positioning. Now, in 6 Siege, it is my belief that movement and positioning are the majority of where your skill is going to come in as you get better at the game. Naturally, as you play more of the game and you learn more of the maps, you're going to learn what movement and positioning is better with each individual map, but there are some general tips for movement and positioning that can help you right out of the gate in your first game. And the first one, once again, is going to be when in doubt, try and reposition. So once again, if you are activating your operator and you have done their turn and you feel like, I don't really need to move them, or I'm just going to drop them without using their action, make sure you stop, and just before you end that operator's activation, look at the board real quick and ask yourself, if I reposition just a little bit, would that make my position a little bit better? Now, why would you do this? Well, there's a lot of scenarios, and I'm guilty of this all the time, where I don't move my operators, and as I'm thinking about it, I'm realizing one of the tools that either side has when they play this game is knowledge, right? So if I'm the attacker and I'm going into the site and I know that where the defender has placed their tokens or where the defender has placed their operators, as long as that defender stays in that same spot, as an attacker, it'll be much easier for me to make a concrete plan on how to get to them and how to work around them. Whereas if the defender is constantly repositioning, the attacker has to go slower. They have to spend more time. They have to waste more of their precious timer. The defender is more unpredictable, and so the attacker can't just make a concrete plan and execute that flawlessly. I'm not saying you have to be constantly moving, but I am saying that being unpredictable is something that can slow down the time for your opponent. And in this game with a timer, you want to be wasting the other team's time. And so being able to reposition will throw off your opponent, and it will mean that they can't just concretely make a plan to get around you. Move in groups. 2 operators together are always better than 1. When a lone operator is just sitting by himself in a room, it's a lot easier to team up and take out that one operator. So both on attack and defense, it can be often advantageous for you to make sure that you have groups and squads that are working together, right? That can overwatch different angles, that can use multiple actions to help both of each other on their turn. It feels like you're doing a lot more actions than what a single operator can give you, and so it's really helpful. Third, and we've already kind of mentioned this with the Overwatch, but stay near cover as much as possible. Cover is everything in this game. If you're constantly behind cover, you can probably, at most, survive 1 gunshot. And surviving 1 gunshot can easily mean the difference between victory or defeat in this game. But oftentimes, especially with heavy cover, you can probably survive up to 2 shots. The key to this game is trying to get a shot at an operator while you're behind cover and they're not behind cover. I know it seems very simple, but seriously, when you're first starting, you're like 3 damage, that's not that big of a deal. Every piece of damage is important in this game, and so staying behind cover as much as possible is going to be what turns you on to more strategy and better movement in this game. Try not to camp behind soft walls or barricades if you are in a position where you can be shot at through those soft walls or barricades. So in the board game, just like in the video game, you can shoot through soft walls and you can shoot through barricades and you can get kills. Now sure, when you're shot at through a soft wall or when you're shot at through a barricade, you get light cover. But the reason you don't want to park near soft walls or near barricades through an angle is because two reasons. One, you just don't want to get shot at when you can't shoot back, right? If you get located and you get shot at through a soft wall, you can't shoot back through a soft wall at the other person. But two, if the other operators can blow up that barricade or blow up that wall and you were just sitting behind it, not watching that wall because you thought you were safe or you thought you had light cover, suddenly an enemy operator is shooting at you and you don't get any cover and you're probably going to die in a single die roll, and now the opponent has the advantage on you. So make sure when you're parked in a spot or when you're overwatching that you're not just sitting right behind a soft wall where someone can easily blow it up and shoot you. And finally, let's move on to just some general tips that don't really fit into any of these categories but are useful nonetheless. Firstly, and this is most important, be adaptable. No matter how well laid your defense is, no matter how well thought out your attack strategy is, what's going to happen is after the first round, something is going to happen that you weren't expecting, like a position is off or you didn't get a roll that you wanted, and suddenly your plan is going to be thrown all out of whack. In this game, you need to be prepared to be adaptable. You may think going in as the attacker, I'm going to push site A because that's definitely where the hostage is. Oh my goodness, I've put all my operators on the side, I flipped the hostage token, and that was the decoy hostage, and the other hostage is across the other side of the map. So one, make sure you plan for eventualities like that, but two, make sure you're not positioning your people in a scenario where you can't adapt and you can't rotate out. So in this scenario I mentioned, make sure you're putting people in a position where you can access both sites, whether it is the bombs or whether it is the two hostages. Make sure you're positioning yourself so you can switch between either sites as either the attacker or defense. If you only defend one site thinking that's where the attacker is going to push and they push the other one, you need to have your defenders in a position where you can rotate over to the other site. You need to be making sure that you're not putting all your hopes on one operator, because what happens if that operator dies in the first round and you were hoping you'd use that gadget? Number two, play the objective. This is not Call of Duty. This is Rainbow Six Siege, and as such is an objective-based game. So try not to get distracted with making sure I have to kill all of my opponents, because you can win this game without ever killing a single enemy operator. Apparently. I mean, I'm sure you could. I actually don't know how you could win without killing at least one. That's not the point. Don't think about that. Thirdly, take it slow. All right, so I know what it's like. You're playing a game with 5 rounds. You're playing a game with a timer that has 5 minutes, and as the game goes on, the timer gets smaller and smaller, and you think, I have to move super fast because I only have 5 minutes to activate all my guys, and I need to make sure that I'm not wasting any time, and you rush. You're like, I just got to get in. I got to get into the site. Or as a defense, you're like, I just got to get a kill. I got to get a kill because I don't have a lot of time. Calm down. Take it slow. It's okay. 5 minutes is longer than it seems. Because this is an objective-based game, and because you have 5 rounds, make sure you're advancing slowly, methodically, and tactically. Make sure you're thinking about what actions you have available. Are you using all of your actions? Are you positioning well? It's okay if you spend 4 minutes thinking and only 1 minute actually doing your turn. Make sure that you're always keeping the turn structure in your mind. What do I mean by that? Okay, well, the turn structure in 6 Siege is always fixed, and it works like this. The attacker goes first, then the defender, then the attacker, then the defender. Why is that important? Well, one, the attacker is always going to get to go first in a round. So if your defense, make sure you're not positioning your characters in a scenario where they got a kill, but since the attacker gets to go first next round, they can just rush in and take out your operator because they get to go first and you didn't have time to move that away, right? As the attacker, always keep in mind, you always get to go first. So keep that in mind, you know that you have a little bit more flexibility in how you plan, because you know at the end of a round, you're going to get to be the one who acts first before the defender. And I know that seems like I say that and you're like, well, okay, yeah, duh, obviously. But seriously, you don't understand how much the turn structure is actually going to affect the game. And you have to start thinking about the turn structure when you're planning your turns, especially as a defender. All right, and fifthly and finally, and this is really important, but don't be scared to screw up and make mistakes in your first couple of games as you learn. I know that I'm making this video all about strategy where you can get better, but seriously, the cool thing about this game is that, especially with the timer, your game is only going to be about 30 minutes to an hour long, so it's a pretty fast-paced game, so don't be scared to make mistakes, because that's how you learn, right? Don't be paralyzed with fear on your turns because you need to make the best move optimally every time. It's okay if you mess up. The game is fast. If you lose in 30 minutes, you can reset, you can play again, and you can play better. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. Don't be afraid to learn. You're always going to get better with each possible game. Don't get analysis paralysis and be too scared to make a move because you think it's not the best. It's okay. Look at every game I've uploaded on my channel. I've probably made 2 or 3 misplays every game, and it's okay, right? It's not going to harm your games. You're going to learn more and more each time. So really, don't be afraid to get in there and just try things out and make mistakes and learn how to play the game better as you go. Trial by fire, as they say, or a fire overlay. That was a bad joke. I shouldn't end on that joke, right? I'm not going to end on that joke.